Cyborgs, and welcome to this video, which is going to be all about audiobooks. Recently, for the Slowathon, I posted a video of how to relax more while reading, and in that video, I talked a bit about my audiobook preferences and habits. In the comment section of that, Jen from Gentle Strength, hello, she asked me if I had any audiobook recommendations, and did she miss a video where I talked about this, and she had not, so I thought that I should make this video talking a bit about how I incorporate audiobooks into my reading, my habits surrounding audiobooks, my recommendations, and my wish list. So this will be a bit of a recap from the how to relax more while reading video, but my audiobook habits, my favorite ways to listen to audiobooks are threefold. One is before bed when the lights are out and I'm lying down but just haven't quite fallen asleep yet. One is listening to audiobooks with noise canceling headphones while crafting, in my case knitting or crochet, and the third would be listening to audiobooks in airports and on airplanes. So sometimes I have a hard time falling asleep at night, and I can toss and turn for upwards of an hour and a half if I'm just not tired enough, and there's nothing more infuriating than being uncomfortable in bed and all you can do is think about how you're not asleep. So I turn on an audiobook just with my external speaker on my iPod. I have an iPod Touch, that's how I primarily listen to my audiobooks, and I just listen to this story while I'm trying to fall asleep. And normally sometimes it's 10, 15, 20 minutes that I listen to this, and when I realize that I'm not quite keeping up with the story as much or that I'm drifting off, then I will stop, pause the audiobook, put my iPod on my nightstand table, and roll over, and in 5 minutes I'm asleep. This is a primary way that I listen to audiobooks recently, and I can get through maybe an audiobook every month and a half if I listen to it in 15, minute increments every night, but it really helps my nighttime routine and it really helps me relax and actually get to sleep. If I want to actually pay attention to a story, or if it's a nonfiction that I really need to be listening to closely, then I like to pair my audiobook listening with crafting, or you can do chores or whatever you like, but just some activity that will keep your hands busy but keep your mind blank. That's knitting for me. I can just click away with the needles and wrap the yarn and not have to think about what I'm doing, if it's a simple project of course, and completely focus my mind on the audiobook. If I'm not doing something with my hands, then my mind starts to wander because my eyes start to wander, and it doesn't work very well for me. I know that some people love listening to audiobooks while doing chores or cooking, but for me, chores and cooking require a bit too much thinking, even if it's just like, oh, I need to get that spot on the mirror better, or oh, what do I need to chop again? So for me, crafting is my preferred way to actively listen to an audiobook outside of the sleeping down, going to sleep thing. And then finally, I often listen to audiobooks while I'm in airports or on planes, just because my attention, because of my anxiety, is so sporadic whenever I'm in airports, because I'm constantly, I feel like suddenly the gate's going to change, or they're going to need to call me up to like the front podium by the gate, or it's ridiculous, it never happens, but still I have a hard time blocking out the noises around me and focusing on physically reading words on a page. So putting some noise canceling headphones on and listening is a great way for me to get some reading done while I'm kind of thinking about other things just a bit. So those are my audiobook habits. Let's get into my recommendations. So I've said this in various videos, but not in one place, but my top audiobook recommendations are two middle grade series, one being Cressida Cowell's How to Train Your Dragon series, which is narrated by David Tennant. The second is the Skullduggery Pleasant series, written by Derek Landy, narrated by Rupert Degas. I love these because these narrators are so skilled at separating the characters with different voices. They have a really wide range of voices that they can do. I also find that these two gentlemen have really lovely voices, in my opinion, to listen to, so that just adds an extra bonus to the audiobook experience. Because these are middle grade series, you don't have to pay very, very close attention to understand what's going on with the plot. I'm not saying that the plots are simplistic, but the stories aren't something like Infinite Jest, or, it's not like The Name of the Wind where you really do want to pay attention and not miss anything. With these, there's a little bit of a pressure off because these are stories meant for children. However, even though these are stories meant for children, I think they're really quality literature. How to Train Your Dragon has a really great, it brings history in, and it's got lots of humor, and it has some really great, well-rounded characters and some villains that are ridiculous as well as complex at the same time. The Skullduggery Pleasant series is my favorite middle grade series. It beats out Harry Potter. So funny as well, but sarcastic instead of, a different kind of humor. It's quite dark at times, but it still has like a perfect balance between the light and the dark. The Skullduggery Pleasant series is about wizards or sorcerers, I think they call themselves sorcerers, in Ireland modern day, and it follows this girl named Stephanie Edgley when she comes to realize that there is a magical world around her. Skullduggery Pleasant becomes her partner. Now, the only thing about the Skullduggery Pleasant series is that only the first 4 books are narrated by Rupert Degas, and then they switch narrators, whom I've not listened to, mostly because Audible only has the first 3 available in English, though they think they have all of them available in German. It's some strange not fairness is what's going on there. But with the How to Train Your Dragon books, it's David Tennant all the way from what I can tell, and I believe they have at least the first 11 now, though I didn't do my proper research. I don't know if 11's the final book, but you can get all of the books on Audible. And just a side note, I really do like listening to Audible audiobooks because it's all in one place. I can adjust the speed of narration and I can bookmark things, and it's just really nice having it in one digital file. The other way that I know how to listen to audiobooks is by borrowing the CDs from the library, though I'm trying not to do that anymore, especially since I just found Overdrive and now I'm going nuts with audiobooks that function, you interface with them like an Audible audiobook, but you're borrowing them and they're for free. That's been really nice. So now let's get on to more recommendations. Another audiobook I would recommend is Romantic Outlaws, which is a biography of Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley, written by Charlotte Gordon and narrated by Susan Lyons. I read this a couple months ago, I believe it was in the summer, and this was a really, really great audiobook, and it was narrated really well, and the biography itself was told almost like a story. It wasn't dry. It was really lovely to get to know more about these 2 women in literature history. I would highly recommend that. Susan Lyons is a great narrator, but I listened to her narrate Out of Africa by Isaac Dinesen, and I didn't like her narration as much in that section, but in Romantic Outlaws, I did quite enjoy her narration. And then finally, I would like to recommend 2 memoirs. Both of them are by Jenny Lawson, and she narrates them herself. Her first one is Let's Pretend This Never Happened, a mostly true memoir, and the second is Furiously Happy, a funny book about horrible things, I think is the subtitle. I can never remember that one. So these are funny memoirs. They really are quite funny about Jenny Lawson's crazy life. The first, it talks more about like her family and growing up and this weird life that she's led. The second book, Furiously Happy, is about mental illness and the funny stories that can come out of dark, dark places. But she narrates them so well. They're so incredibly highly entertaining, and Furiously Happy got me through a long airport visit at one point. So I would very much recommend those if you want to do a memoir read by the person who wrote it. Now let's talk about my audiobook wish list. So I have a couple classics on this list, a memoir and a fiction book that I would really like to get my hands on. I'm hoping I'll get Audible credits for Christmas. So I want to talk about Thomas Hardy's Return of the Native, narrated by Alan Rickman, and the narrator is why I want to listen to this. I've only read The Test of D'Urberville by Thomas Hardy, and I liked it, but I wasn't blown away, and I haven't really been drawn to any of his other work, but I love the idea of being able to listen to Alan Rickman tell me a story. And frankly, for me, with audiobooks, a lot of time the narration matters more than the actual story for me. Case in point, one of the fiction books that I would like to listen to is Retribution Falls by Chris Wooding, which is narrated by Rupert Degas. I'm kind of addicted to looking at Rupert Degas's work on Audible, and then anything that sounds remotely interesting, adding that to my wish list, because he has just such a lovely narrating voice. Something about it, I just really, really love the way that he narrates. And so having that sort of thread that I can connect to might really broaden what sorts of books I read, because if it's just read well to me, perhaps I'll pick up a nonfiction I didn't think of. Or in this case, Retribution Falls. I've heard Mercedes from Hershey's Bookish Musings talk about it, but I wasn't really going to read them myself. But now that it looks like Rupert Degas is narrating them, or at least the first one, I'm a bit more interested. Another classic I'm interested in listening to is David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, which is narrated this edition by Richard Armitage. From what I saw in the Hobbit films, because I've not seen anything else that Armitage has been in, he has a very lovely voice, and I think that listening to a long Dickens told by him with his soothing, melodious sort of voice would probably be a lovely way to end the evening each day. I, so far, have not been a super fan of Dickens. I think the Dickens I've liked most is A Christmas Carol, and that's tied up with childhood nostalgia, but perhaps listening to a Dickens will be more successful for my enjoyment, and hopefully this narrator will be one I'm quite fond of. And finally, a memoir I have on my list is Wishful Drinking by Carrie Fisher, also narrated by her, and this is the Carrie Fisher who played Princess Leia in Star Wars. This is one of her memoirs. I believe she has 3, and she talks a bit about being on the Star Wars set in her early life, and I think she had Cary Grant as like a godfather, and her crazy mother, Debbie Reynolds, who I love in Singing in the Rain, but apparently she was a bit strange as a mother figure. So this is definitely on my list. It comes highly recommended from my best friend, and that has been, on my wish list for ages, but I just haven't gotten to it. So hopefully with some Audible credits, I will. So that's about all I have to say in regards to audiobooks at this time. If you have any audiobook recommendations for me or narrator recommendations, please leave them down below in the comment section, and I'm sure the other people creeping in the comment section might appreciate those recommendations as well. Thank you for watching, and until next time, continue to be lovely and read some great audiobooks. And also, thanks to my patrons. I really appreciate your continued support. It means a lot, and it makes things a bit easier for me in my life, and I just really appreciate you and your financial support. So thank you once again, and I hope you are having a lovely day.